My husband slammed the divorce papers on the counter so loudly the mugs shook, and for a moment I wondered if he practiced this scene in the mirror. He spoke like he wanted an audience, raising his voice so my assistant working in the other room could hear every word. "Sign them, Chloe. You have 48 hours to get out. Brittany and I are done waiting." He didn't bother hiding the car outside where she sat acting like she already owned my life. I looked at him, then at the papers, and I smiled, not because I wasn't hurt, but because he had no idea what he was stepping into. The girl he thought was his fresh start was walking straight into consequences she didn't even see coming. Before I touched the papers, I took a breath and reminded myself why I had to stay calm. I wanted people to hear this the right way. This isn't just about a marriage ending. It's about how easily someone can try to strip away everything you built and how important it is to stand your ground. If you've ever had someone push you aside like you didn't matter, stay with me. Your support helps keep these stories alive, and it means a lot to people who need the reminder that they're not alone. While Mark stood there trying to look powerful, I studied him the way I used to in conference rooms when he pitched ideas he barely understood. 10 years married, and still he thought raising his voice made him right. He didn't notice that Brittany's stepping out of the car wasn't confidence, it was entitlement. She believed the house was already hers. He believed I would fall apart. They both believed the life I built was something they could casually claim. I didn't argue or ask why. I didn't beg him to reconsider. I just watched him talk like he was giving a speech to people who admired him. He claimed the house was theirs, claimed the future he imagined with her was already set, claimed I should pack my things and disappear quietly. But what he didn't know was simple. This was my home, my life, and my foundation. And the calm on my face wasn't shock. It was the start of everything he never prepared for. I walked into my study and shut the door behind me, needing a moment to think without Mark's voice echoing in my head. Being in that room always brought back memories of my mother, Eleanor. She was calm, wise, and stronger than she ever looked. She used to tell me, "Men can betray you, but assets and paperwork never lie." Back then, I didn't pay much attention. Now those words felt like they were holding me up. My mother had created the Evercrest Trust long before I ever met Mark. She told me it was protection for the future, even if I couldn't see the reason yet. I remember sitting beside her as she explained how every property would go into the trust. She said, "One day this will protect you when nothing else does." I didn't know how true that would become. Mark never bothered to ask about the trust. He thought marriage automatically gave him ownership of everything I had. He never looked at a single document. He just assumed. I opened the drawer and pulled out the binder where I kept the trust papers. Seeing my mother's signature on the pages steadied me. Every single property Mark bragged about, the house he tried to claim, the cottage he talked about like he built it, even the rental buildings, was held by the trust. None of it belonged to him. He had been so sure he controlled everything. But the truth was that he didn't own any part of the life he thought he was taking from me. For months, I felt like something wasn't right. Mark had too many late nights, too many strange explanations, too many stories that shifted every time I asked a question. Instead of confronting him, I watched quietly. I checked our accounts, our statements, and the transactions he tried to hide. I noticed money moving to places it didn't belong. Transfers labeled as business development that didn't match his workload. Charges that didn't fit our life. When I followed the trail, the truth hit me in the face. The money wasn't for work. It was going straight to Brittany. Expensive gifts, hotel stays, dinners, clothes, things he never even considered buying for me. I saved everything. Every receipt. Every transfer. Every message. I didn't want guesses or emotions. I wanted proof. I kept going because I needed to see the full picture. I noticed withdrawals from our joint account that didn't match his excuses. I found hidden expenses he tried to bury under fake labels. With every new detail, I felt myself growing steadier, not weaker. While he thought he was fooling me, I was documenting everything he tried to hide. I didn't rush. I didn't confront him because yelling wouldn't fix anything. I built my own quiet plan, step by step, exactly the way my mother taught me, calm, patient, and prepared. By the time he slammed those papers on the counter and told me to leave, I already knew he had no ground to stand on. My foundation was stronger than he ever realized, and I was finally ready to use it. I wanted to understand who Brittany really was, so I started looking into her life the same way I would research a new business partner. I didn't rush. I followed small clues. Names she mentioned online, places she visited, people she interacted with. It didn't take long before a pattern started to appear. She wasn't with Mark because she loved him. She treated him the same way she treated several other men before him. With a few careful searches, I found her social profiles and the trails she left behind. Her photos, check-ins, and tags told a story she probably didn't want anyone to piece together. Through public posts and connections, I discovered 2 other men involved with her. One was a retired athlete who looked like he was trying to stay relevant online by flashing wealth he no longer had. The other owned a chain of restaurants and often posted about supporting young entrepreneurs. Both men followed her, liked everything she shared, and commented like they were her biggest fans. It wasn't hard to link their messages to the same promises she made to Mark. I read more and realized these men weren't just admirers. They were paying for her lifestyle. Trips, outfits, gadgets, even wellness retreats. She told all of them she needed money to fund a life-changing wellness app, something she claimed would make them rich once it launched. She pitched the same dream over and over, and they all believed her. She knew exactly what she was doing, and she used every bit of charm she had to make it work. Seeing this, something inside me shifted. I had assumed Mark betrayed me because he chose someone else. But now I saw it wasn't that simple. He thought he was investing in a future with her. He believed her stories, believed he was helping her grow. He didn't see that she was collecting men the way some people collect handbags. Each one served a purpose. Each one funded a different part of her life. She played them while making each feel special. I watched a video she posted where she talked about being mentored by powerful men. I understood what she meant. She wasn't learning anything from them, she was taking from them. She chose men who liked attention and wanted to feel important. Mark fit the role perfectly. She encouraged him, praised him, and made him feel like he was saving her. He didn't notice he was just another name on her list. Finding all this didn't make me pity him, but it changed the way I looked at the situation. Mark wasn't only cheating, he was being manipulated. He handed her money because she told him it was an investment. He gifted her expensive items because she convinced him she needed them for her brand. He thought he was building something with her, but she was only building her own comfort. I sat back after uncovering everything and felt a different kind of clarity. The problem wasn't just Mark's betrayal. The woman he trusted was using him the same way she used every man in her circle. My anger wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about watching someone take advantage of people who didn't even realize they were being played. I knew then that my response had to be bigger than confronting Mark. Brittany created this web, and she didn't care who got caught in it. My revenge would not only reveal the truth, it would make sure her tricks finally stopped working. I sat at my desk with the door closed, letting the silence settle around me. Mark expected me to start packing, but I wasn't going anywhere. I turned on my computer and opened a blank email. My hands were steady, not because I wasn't upset, but because I finally had direction. Everything I had learned about Brittany had led me to this moment, and now it was time to use it. I began writing slowly, choosing every word with care. I wasn't writing out of anger. I was writing because the truth needed to reach the people who had been fooled just like Mark. I didn't want a dramatic speech or emotional story. I wanted facts, plain and simple. I attached the documents I had collected, payment histories, screenshots of her messages, records that matched across different accounts, and photos where she reused the same promises. It painted a clear picture of how she operated. I typed the subject line, "Information you need to see." I added the names of the retired athlete and the restaurant owner, placing them beside Mark's address. I didn't know these men personally, but I knew they deserved honesty. They had been caught in the same trap, and they needed to know it wasn't their fault. Brittany had repeated the same routine with each of them, and none of them realized they were sharing the same dream she sold to Mark. After attaching everything, I wrote a short message. I explained that we were all dealing with the same person and that I had evidence to prove it. I kept my tone calm and polite. I wasn't accusing them or blaming them. I was simply giving them the information they never received. I told them that the business Brittany talked about didn't exist. The app she bragged about was nothing more than a concept she used to pull money from anyone who trusted her. Before sending it, I read through everything again to make sure it was clear. There was no emotion in my words, only facts she could not twist. I ended the message with one line. "We have a shared issue that needs attention. Please contact me." It was simple, and it said exactly what I needed it to say. My finger hovered over the send button for a moment. Not because I was unsure, but because this click would be the beginning of something new. I wasn't just defending myself. I was bringing light to something bigger than my marriage. Brittany had tied all of them into her game without a second thought. By contacting them, I was breaking the pattern she relied on. Finally, I pressed send. The screen blinked, and the message was gone. I leaned back in my chair and breathed out slowly. It felt like placing the first stone of a larger plan. I didn't know how each man would react, but I knew I had done the right thing. They deserved the truth just as much as I did. For the first time since Mark slammed those papers in front of me, I felt a sense of control returning. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was making my first real move. And it was only the beginning. Mark followed me around the house like he expected me to break down at any moment. He watched my face closely, waiting for tears, anger, or fear. Anything that would show he still had control. When he didn't get the reaction he wanted, his voice grew sharper. He stood in front of me, puffing up his chest as if that would make his words stronger. "You'll leave with nothing, Chloe. I've earned this life. I built everything we have." I didn't respond right away. I let his words hang in the air. He thought shouting would shake me, but it only reminded me how little he understood. After a moment, I walked to the dining table, pulled out a folder, and placed it down. He followed me, still expecting a fight. Instead, I opened the folder and pushed a document toward him. "Mark," I said quietly, "when did you and Brittany buy this house? I must have missed the day you signed anything." He frowned, confused. I turned the page so he could clearly see the title, Evercrest Trust Property Ownership. His eyes scanned the paper, and I watched the confidence fade from his face. He looked at the date, then the signatures, only mine and my mother's. He flipped to the next page, then another, faster each time, hoping to find his name somewhere. It wasn't there. His hands began shaking slightly. I could see the moment reality hit him. The property he had bragged about, the home he planned to show off to Brittany, the place he told her was their fresh start. None of it belonged to him. The silence in the room grew heavy. His mouth opened like he wanted to argue, but he couldn't find a single word. Before he could recover, my phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, but it rang again. Then again. Mark finally snapped. "Are you going to get that?" I picked it up, checked the caller ID, and felt a small wave of satisfaction. It was one of the men I had emailed, the restaurant owner. I didn't answer, but I let Mark see the screen. His confusion deepened. Then a second call came in from the retired athlete. Mark looked at the phone, then at me, then back at the trust papers, trying to connect everything. He knew something was happening, but he had no idea how big it was. He paced the room, mumbling to himself, as if searching for some version of the story where he still controlled the outcome. But that version no longer existed. I sat calmly on the chair, waiting. I didn't need to raise my voice or defend myself. The truth was speaking louder than anything I could say. I wasn't the one falling apart, he was. Everything he thought he took from me was slipping through his fingers, and he couldn't stop it. The phone lit up again with another call. The retired athlete left a voicemail. The restaurant owner sent a text asking if we could talk immediately. Mark watched all of it with growing dread. This was only the beginning. The cracks in his plan were spreading fast, and he could see it. He just didn't know how deep they went yet. Brittany eventually decided she had waited long enough outside. She pushed the front door open without knocking, walking in like she already owned the place. I heard her heels tapping quickly across the floor, and then she appeared in the doorway with a bright smile that vanished the moment she saw Mark. He wasn't standing tall or proud anymore. He looked shaken, unable to form a full sentence. She glanced between us, confused by the tension in the room. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to sound confident but failing. I stood up slowly, giving her a calm smile. "Perfect timing, Brittany. We were just talking about your business plans." She blinked. "My what?" I picked up my phone and held it out. "Your app. The one you pitched to all your supporters." Her face went tight, but she tried to laugh it off. "I don't know what you're talking about." I didn't argue. Instead, I walked to the table and put my phone on speaker. "Good," I said, "because they have a few questions." The phone immediately filled with voices. First the restaurant owner, furious and demanding answers about where his investment had gone. Then the former athlete, angry that he had been told the same promises Mark received. Both of them started listing the exact lines she had fed them, phrases she clearly reused without changing a word. Brittany froze. Her eyes darted all over the room like she was searching for a way out. Her fingers tightened around her purse. She opened her mouth several times, but no sound came out. She couldn't talk her way through this. Mark stood behind me, pale and sweating, finally realizing that he wasn't her only partner. He wasn't even her favorite. He was just another name she added to her rotation. Every detail they shared made him look smaller. The men on the phone began comparing how much each of them had given her, what she told them the money was for, and how she convinced them to keep everything quiet. Their voices overlapped, angrier with every second. They didn't care that she was standing in front of me. They wanted answers. Brittany tried to interrupt, but the moment she spoke, one of the men snapped, "Do not lie again." She stopped cold. The room was filled with the sound of her breathing, fast and uneven. I watched her carefully. For the first time since she entered Mark's life, her confidence was gone. Her posture sagged, her cheeks lost their color, and she couldn't hide behind her usual smile. She looked at Mark for help, but he had nothing to give. He was just as lost as she was. He finally understood she hadn't chosen him for love or partnership. She had chosen his wallet. The men continued talking, each detail cutting away the image she built. Every secret she thought she kept hidden was being dragged into the open. I didn't raise my voice or add anything. I didn't need to. The truth was tearing through the room on its own. By the time the call ended, Brittany's entire act had collapsed. She stood there shaking, exposed completely, with nowhere left to run. I stayed calm as I laid everything out in front of Mark and Brittany. I didn't yell or try to humiliate them. I just let the facts speak. I told them that before either of them stepped into my house that day, my lawyer had already filed a civil suit against Brittany. Every message, every transaction, every piece of evidence she left behind with those men was included in the case. I had made sure the other victims were on board. They had all been tricked in the same way. I didn't need to exaggerate anything. The truth was more than enough. Brittany's usual confidence melted as I handed her the lawsuit papers. Her name stared back at her from the printed notice, and I could see the panic starting to form. No more smooth lines or rehearsed charm could cover her tracks. I watched her struggle to find words while the proof of her deception sat clearly in front of her. Then I turned to Mark. I calmly explained something he never expected to hear. All the money he spent on Brittany came from our shared assets. Every gift, every trip, every expense traced back to our accounts. I told him that because of this, I could take legal action for dissipation of marital assets. The court could count every dollar he had used against him in the divorce. I handed him a folder full of the records I had quietly collected, and I watched as he flipped through each page, his confidence slowly crumbling with every line. I didn't need to accuse him or lecture him about betrayal. The evidence was enough. I explained that he would lose any claim to the house because he tried to divert marital property to Brittany. He would face consequences in the divorce for using our funds to support her scams. And he would also have to deal with the legal fallout from Brittany's fraud. I kept my voice steady, letting the truth deliver its own impact. Mark sat there, stunned and shrinking under the weight of what he had done. The man who had shouted at me about leaving with nothing was now quiet, trying to process that everything he thought he had earned was slipping away. When he finally spoke, it was barely audible, asking if I would really follow through with all of this. I told him matter-of-factly that the process was already in motion. There was no threat, no drama, just reality. I watched both of them realize that the life they imagined was a lie. Brittany would face the fraud case, backed by multiple victims. Mark would be held accountable for squandering our shared assets. The house, the money, the future he thought he controlled, it all vanished. I felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing I had taken control not with anger, but with careful planning. I wasn't just protecting myself. I was ensuring that truth and justice finally caught up with them. After the lawsuit was filed, everything began to change quickly. Brittany started receiving notices from multiple parties. Each one listed claims against her for fraud and misrepresentation. I followed the updates closely, making sure every detail was correct. It wasn't just a civil matter. There was talk of a criminal investigation. I could see her confidence cracking even further as the reality of her actions caught up with her. For the first time, she couldn't charm or manipulate her way out. Every person she had taken advantage of was now demanding accountability, and there was no one left to defend her lies. Mark's life also took a sharp turn. The man who once acted so proud now had to face the consequences of his choices. He lost the house he thought he could claim, and he had to move into a small, modest apartment. His career suffered as the scandal followed him. Clients who had respected him started asking questions, and some of his professional connections quietly disappeared. The luxury he flaunted, the lifestyle he promised Brittany, all collapsed. Everything he tried to control slipped through his fingers, and there was nothing left to shield him from the consequences. Through it all, the divorce moved forward, and I made sure it was finalized on my terms. Every asset, every property, every piece of the life I had built stayed with me. It wasn't about revenge for the sake of cruelty. It was about fairness and protecting what was mine. I felt a sense of relief as the paperwork was signed. The chapter with Mark and Brittany was officially over, and I could finally take a breath. Sitting alone in my home afterward, I took a moment to reflect on everything that had happened. The shock of betrayal had been deep, and the hurt had been intense. But looking back, I realized that it had also shown me what I was capable of. I had stayed calm, made careful decisions, and acted with precision. Every step I took reminded me that I didn't need someone else to define my worth or control my life. I could feel the difference in myself, the weight of fear and uncertainty lifted, replaced with clarity and confidence. The pain from losing trust and facing lies was still there, but it no longer controlled me. Instead, I felt empowered. I had handled a situation that could have destroyed me, and I came out stronger. The quiet moments of reflection brought peace. I didn't need approval from anyone or validation from those who had hurt me. I had taken control of my life, my finances, and my future. The experience taught me a valuable lesson. Betrayal can cut deeply, but when faced with it wisely, it can also become the catalyst for growth, strength, and self-respect. I looked around at my home, at the life I had rebuilt, and felt a sense of calm satisfaction. I hadn't just survived the storm. I had come out the other side, more powerful and more certain than ever of my own strength. I decided it was time to take full control of my life and the legacy my mother had left me. The Evercrest Trust had always been more than just paperwork. It was a foundation she had built to protect me, even before I understood its importance. Now, I stepped into the role I had been prepared for all along. I started reviewing every property, every investment, and every account tied to the trust. Each decision I made was deliberate, aimed at expanding and strengthening what my mother had started. I wanted to ensure the assets were not just preserved, but grown, and that they reflected my vision for the future. Managing the trust became more than a responsibility. It became a source of empowerment. Every meeting I attended, every deal I approved, reminded me of how capable I truly was. I had learned to trust my instincts, to make decisions without fear of betrayal or interference. Each success, no matter how small, reinforced my confidence. I began to feel a sense of accomplishment that wasn't tied to anyone else's approval. For the first time in years, I felt in complete control of my own life. The house that had once been a stage for lies and manipulation transformed into a place of strength. I walked through the rooms and no longer felt the shadow of betrayal. Instead, I saw reminders of my resilience and determination. Every corner, every space that had once been tainted by Mark's and Brittany's actions now symbolized my ability to overcome adversity. I decorated, planned, and arranged things the way I wanted, creating an environment that reflected who I was and the life I intended to live. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about reclaiming it and giving it new meaning. I also discovered a deeper sense of purpose. I began mentoring young women in business, sharing insights I had gained from both my mother's wisdom and my own hard-earned experiences. Guiding others, seeing them grow and succeed, gave me a sense of fulfillment I hadn't realized I was missing. The pain of betrayal, while still a memory, had been transformed into a tool for strength and motivation. As I reflected on everything, I realized this wasn't just about winning a battle over Mark and Brittany. It was about reclaiming the narrative of my own life. I had been the one writing the story all along, and now I was doing it with clarity, intention, and power. No one could take that away from me. Standing in the study, looking over the properties, the investments, and the life I had rebuilt, I felt a quiet pride. I hadn't just survived. I had grown, learned, and become someone stronger than I ever imagined. My life was mine entirely, and that truth was the most powerful victory of all. 1 year later, I found myself in the middle of my garden, surrounded by laughter and chatter. The sunlight filtered softly through the trees, and the air smelled of flowers and fresh grass. My home was alive with energy, not the tension and deceit that had once filled it. Friends I could truly trust mingled around me, sharing stories and enjoying the day. I moved among them, smiling and feeling the joy of connection without any pretense. For the first time in years, I felt fully at ease in my own life, completely in control of my happiness. I paused for a moment near the patio and checked my phone. A A forwarded email caught my eye. Another article about Brittany, this time mentioning that she was facing formal charges. I felt a flicker of recognition, but no anger. No satisfaction. I deleted it immediately. It didn't matter anymore. The drama, the lies, the schemes, they were all part of a life that no longer touched me. They were ghosts, shadows of the past I had left behind. I looked around at the gathering and realized how far I had come. The house, once a symbol of betrayal, now felt warm and welcoming. The garden, full of life and color, mirrored the growth I had experienced inside. I had rebuilt not just my home, but myself. Every challenge, every painful moment, had been a step toward this peace and strength. I had taken control of my story, and now I was living it fully, without fear or regret. In that quiet moment, I understood the truth about power and revenge. It wasn't about making them suffer or proving anything to anyone. True victory was in creating a life so rich and full that their attempts to harm me became irrelevant. I had survived the betrayal, yes, but more importantly, I had transformed it into a force that shaped my future. I was radiant not because I had wealth or status alone, but because I had reclaimed my confidence, my vision, and my freedom. As the party continued, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. The wreckage they left behind was just a memory now, a distant echo that no longer had power over me. My life was mine to live, vibrant, unbroken, and complete. I smiled, knowing that I had turned everything that once hurt me into a foundation for something greater. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving, and that was the ultimate triumph. Do you think I handled everything the right way by taking control and exposing them, or should I have let it go? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories like this.